Hey guys, so in today's episode I want to tell you about my one true addiction. It is a substance which I cannot quit, and I've been taking it now for decades, and that is coffee. Now everyone says they love coffee, but I really love coffee. And I had my first coffee probably when I was something like 7, 8 years old. And I remember getting hooked to the iced coffee. So it was always a treat of mine. We'd go to this little school that I went to as a kid, and we had one shop in the town. Okay, this was a very small town. And when I could stop there, when my mother would take me there and I could get an iced coffee, that was like a big treat for me. So I still remember Brown's coffee.
Coffee, 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 chill, coffee, chill, coffee, chill.
And then all throughout high school, it was the same thing, iced coffee. When I got out of high school, I went traveling. I went to Canada for almost a year, and that was when I discovered Starbucks. You see, we didn't have Starbucks in Perth, Australia. It hadn't yet arrived there, and I don't think it still has. So my drink of choice in Canada was an iced Frappuccino. And when I got back from Canada, I went to university. It was the same thing. I was back to drinking Brown's coffee. And then shortly after that, I moved to Malaysia, 2014. And every single day, multiple times, I would be going to the nearby Starbucks and asking for an iced latte with 3 shots. And then later on, I moved on to 4 shots. That became my minimum. Eventually, it got to a point where it was just pretty much coffee, ice, and a very small amount of milk. So I got really addicted to it. And I drank Starbucks coffee for almost 10 years. I must have spent easily over $10,000 US over those years on iced lattes. I really was addicted to them. And then I discovered gourmet coffee, real coffee, and my stance on Starbucks coffee has changed a lot. I now look at Starbucks as being like the McDonald's of coffee. It's actually quite terrible compared to real coffee. So I'm a little bit of a coffee snob now, and I really love to have the best of the best when it comes to coffee. And I don't mind spending quite a bit of money on getting the very best beans I can. Here in Costa Rica, we have Brit coffee. Now Brit coffee, that's the big selling one. That's the one that everyone likes. I don't like that. There's actually a place in Harco which has the best coffee I've ever tasted, and they farm it locally. So I actually buy my coffee beans from there. And what I actually did is I took the coffee machine in the restaurant here at the resort and I moved it into my kitchen. And that's one of my favorite parts of the day. So I'm going to go and show you now my process for making premium coffee. Okay, so welcome to my kitchen. So this is the most important part, what coffee beans you're using. This Nescafe, this is what I grew up on in Australia, and they have this even here in Costa Rica. This is really bad coffee, okay? Instant coffee, if it's all you've ever drunk before, then you don't know any better. But once you move to coffee beans and grinding them, the taste is just, it's night and day. So once you get on this and you grind your own coffee, you can't go back to instant coffee no more. I don't like to leave the coffee beans sitting in here for days. I prefer to keep them sealed in their bag, and then I put a little bit in each time that I want to use it. So first thing to do is to grind the coffee. Now, before you go and grind your coffee, you have to tare this. In other words, make it equal 0 grams with an empty, whatever this is called. Bring this over, and then you want to measure out your 18 grams of coffee. Okay, so that's 17. So even if it's 17, I will still go and get 1 extra gram of coffee because that makes all the difference with the flavor. So the next step is we need to compress this coffee, and the most important part is that we do it consistently so that there's not parts where it's higher and lower, otherwise the water won't pass through evenly, and it might come out too fast or too slow, and it's going to affect how much coffee we get out. Okay, so we want to get this nice and flat, and then what I do is I put my fingers around the edge so I can feel if one side is being pushed in too much, and that way I can keep it nice and flat. Not too much. It should be nice and flat like that, and even around the sides. Now next we need to measure our cup tear it so it shows at 0 because we need to measure out the exact amount of coffee that we're about to extract from those ground up beans. Now, if this is done correctly, if it's ground to the right fineness, then it should look like a mouse's tail. That's what I was taught. It should look like a mouse's tail. And as you can see, that's exactly the thickness here. It looks pretty good. So the next thing I do is I weigh my liquid coffee. Now, I always aim for 50 grams. I like it pretty strong. You're meant to do somewhere around double the amount of ground up beans, which was 18 times 2, so 36. But I like to do 50 grams, and I do 2 of these. So it's a pretty strong latte, but that's the way I like it. Okay, so we should have about 100 grams of coffee. We've got 98, so that's close enough. Okay, so for the milk, I don't use the low-fat milk. I use the normal milk. I want it to be nice and creamy. So we don't want to bury it too deep and also not too shallow. You got to keep your hand on it because when it gets too hot to touch, oh, that's hot. So after I've creamed the milk, I get rid of the big bubbles. So now personally, I prefer to drink out of a paper cup because I can take it anywhere I want. I can put a lid on it. So I'm pouring the coffee only at the very end because otherwise the temperature runs out from this faster than it does in the ceramic cup. Okay, and then this is the part where you do the latte art. And this is the part where I have no idea what I'm talking about. This is something that I just haven't been able to master yet. Now my milk is pretty average. You can see it's very watery and then just creamy on the top. So this is not a good job of frothing the milk. It was kind of hard to do with one hand while I was holding the camera, and plus I'm just making excuses really. I didn't do a very good job of that. But the milk's not right. But all the latte art, that's something that takes a lot more practice. And anyone who can do that, I do admire, because I've been doing this every day now for, well, probably a year, and I still can't do it. So there you have it. That's how you make the perfect 100 gram latte coffee. If you have one of these every morning, this will do a very good job of waking you up. And if you have 2, you are going to struggle to sleep. I'll see you tomorrow.